Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Earwax. I'm Colin, and these are my favorite albums. So, today on my favorite albums, we're going to be talking about probably one of the most important metal albums for at least for me personally, and that is going to be The Game of Life by Arsonists Get All the Girls. Now, the Arsonists Get All the Girls were a deathcore, metalcore, extreme metal. I don't know. They defined and kind of broke a lot of different genres. But for the sake of this video, we'll just go with deathcore because that kind of is what the base of their sound is. Band from Santa Cruz. So I first discovered them when I first moved to the Bay Area in 2007. Buddy of mine showed me, I want to say it was Shoeshine for Neptune, or it was either that or Scobra versus Cupcake, but Cupcake Battle of the Bulge off of their first studio album, Hits from the Bow, which my pressing of this is actually both. So I've got Hits from the Bow and The Game of Life. But for this video, we're just going to be talking about Game of Life. So again, I was shown that song by a buddy of mine, and I had listened to heavier music before. One of the first really heavy bands I ever got into was Haste the Day, and then also at the same time Norma Jean. So I've been listening to heavier, more hard deathcore and metalcore. Got into bands like As I Lay Dying, Lamb of God, and that was some of my early introduction into those genres. But when I first heard Arsonists Get All the Girls, I was completely blown away. They were all over the place. They were chaotic. The energy in this album was something that I had not really experienced before, and I was absolutely obsessed with this album for a couple of years. And holy shit, if you don't know this album, it is, and you're a fan of deathcore, extreme metal, electronic core, anything mathcore, anything in that sort of realm of subgenre for metal, you need to listen to this album. It is raw, it is unhinged, it is all over the place, and simultaneously it is very, very well put together. And just the riffs and the fills that they're able to accomplish on this album are just unmatched in my opinion. This was the last album they put out before the untimely death of their bass player Patrick Mason. He unfortunately died, I think, not too long after they finished recording this album. It was also the first album they put out on their main record label, Century Media, who would go on to release their next two albums as well. And it is such a good time. I mean, the one of the first albums that I had listened to where the song titles were just seemingly completely random. I think the more I listened to them, the more I kind of found out that at least some of the song titles did have some meaning into the lyrical content of the songs, but a lot of it is just pretty all over the place, which is a fairly common trope in metalcore and deathcore bands. But the few real highlights from this album are Save the Castle, Screw the Princess. I mentioned it earlier, but Shoeshine for Neptune, and Claiming Middle Age a Decade Early. All absolutely incredible songs, but honestly, front to back, this whole thing's a banger. They've got some really short, kind of really fast speed metal, deathcore, borderline grindcore tracks, and then they've got some more, 3 to 4 minute kind of true deathcore experimental metal stuff. Absolutely brutal. It's also one of the first times I had ever heard synthesizer be used in metal music, which then went on to become one of my favorite things. I'm a huge fan of electronic core in general. It's not a big genre. It's a pretty niche. It's a lot of bands that were kind of dismissed by most of the metal community, at least back in the day. But I think this is one of the few bands that did it so well that even the harshest critics of electronic core didn't have much to say, because again, this album was just such a fucking banger. It is, again, one of the just most unhinged albums I've ever listened to. Drastic tempo changes, drastic tonal shifts from song to song or even within songs. and it's just beautifully chaotic in the best way. And this was one of the first albums that I really heard a mix of like really low, like guttural screaming, and then like really high, kind of more screechy singing. And or screaming. There's a lot of other bands that were doing this and that had done this prior to this album, but it was again one of my first experiences of like seeing that range and how well it could work together. The drums on this album are absolutely insane. Again, the riffs, the fills, like every single part of this album, it just takes you to like one extreme end to the other, and it's just fucking brilliant. And again, it's definitely not everyone's cup of tea. I understand why deathcore is like kind of the dirty stepchild, or in the metal community. But if you like extreme heavy music at all, I mean, you've got to give this album at least one listen, because it definitely goes beyond just like traditional deathcore, and it's worth at least diving into. It's just an album that I will always cherish. I'll always love. I was lucky enough to see them live a few times. Again, they're from Santa Cruz. I was living in the Bay Area. I moved to the Bay Area in 2007, so like right when this album came out. And they were incredible live. Even after they switched vocalists a few times, they still always maintain like their core sound, and they are just such a fun band. Never took themselves too seriously too. I know there was a music video trend back in the day with like some of these more experimental metalcore and deathcore bands, where they would do a music video playing on like toy instruments. They did it. I Set My Friends on Fire. I'm sure there's like 5 or 6 other bands out there that have at least one music video where they're playing on toy instruments. But the music video for Shoeshine for Neptune will always be my favorite. That does that trend. It's a hilarious video. Again, they don't take themselves too seriously, which I always love in a band. I think I think you have to be able to like poke fun of yourself a little bit when you're doing this style of metal, because there's going to be people out there that just absolutely fucking hate it. And if you can't, kind of take the piss out of yourself and joke around, then you're just going to always be sort of taking the brunt of a lot of other people's jokes. So anyway, that's my rant about this album. Again, it's fucking incredible. It's an A+ for me, hands down. And if you haven't listened to it yet, go check it out, especially if you're a fan of deathcore, metalcore, anything like in that genre or subgenre of metal. And if you have listened to it, let me know down in the comments what you think. And as always, I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.